Nate Skinner, welcome to the podcast, bro.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. This is the second round. Nagelbear podcast.
Oh man, it's a throwback right there.
Yeah, that's a throwback.
Anybody watching your YouTube channel now should start searching that.
Yeah. Well, they have. There's four subscribers from like that I've gained from over the last 5 years, in the last like few weeks or whatever. So
the early years.
The early years, yeah. It was fun though. It was a blast. I love doing them. It was a lot more work than this, ironically.
This is a much more sophisticated set than what you were rolling with
before.
before.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, this is much more fun because it's like, this is it, we're doing it. Whereas that one was like, me and Amanda just moved in together. I had to keep setting up every time people would come, and I was using 2 different cameras. It was a pain in the ass to edit. It was like a whole thing. But
I remember that. The cameras would die mid-shot.
Yeah, mid-shot, yeah. Now it's all set up and everything's ready to rock and roll. But yeah, man. Nate Skinner, longtime friend, M1 Abrams tanker, a chaplain's assistant.
Religious affairs NCO.
Religious affairs NCO.
Yeah.
An amazing lover. Thank you.
my wife might not agree all the time on that, but
what's going on, bro?
Sufficient, maybe is what she would say. I'm not sure.
Sufficient. It gets the job done.
Marginal at best.
Yeah, bro. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
Glad you make the time.
I appreciate you inviting me over.
Nate, don't worry. Nate talked to his PAO in the National Guard, so he's trying to keep tight-lipped, at least on stuff when it comes to the Guard.
when you're still in, like, you have to be careful, right? Like,
yeah.
Public Affairs Office is there for a reason, and they want to make sure that you're not going to say anything that is like, going to be
demeaning against the Guard.
Yeah, saying too much or sharing too many details that just don't need to be said. So, had a quick conversation. Our PAO officer is amazing.
Yeah.
And she was like, hey, just, make sure that you kind of keep things high level. I'm like, too easy, right?
Yeah.
So, but I joined the Guard in 2012.
Yeah. I tried getting you to become an MP in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so...
to make recruiting quotas back in 2005. Or 2006 or whatever.
So you and I have known each other long enough to the point where when you got into the Marine Corps, we were all kind of just preparing for college.
Yeah. Well, I'd signed up our senior year.
You did.
Yeah.
But as senior year comes and goes, right, we all go into college. You were going off to legitimate war, right?
Yeah.
So, I remember being in my apartment, typing you out letters and stuff just to send. And I think I would send them once a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I knew that if I were there, I'd want letters.
Yeah.
And then you came back from, I think, your first tour.
Yeah.
And you showed up at Best Buy where I was working in 2005.
6. It would have been 6. But
well,
yeah.
So I started in 2005. So at some point between 5 and 6, tried to recruit me into the Marine Corps. I was a little bit pissed when you left because I was like, he's supposed to be my best friend, and now he's recruiting me into the Marine Corps. Oh, he just wants his extra leave.
Well, pretty much. I need you to sign up for 4 years so I can go and hang out.
So I was a little bit pissed because I was like, what am I, just 2 weeks? But the interesting thing about that, and I've always believed that everything happens for a reason, right? You had joined the service. I had some other friends of mine through just high school years or volunteer opportunities that had joined the National Guard, right? I knew somebody else who was getting into the Marines. I knew somebody else who joined the Coast Guard. Yeah. And so I kind of had this bug. And for me, I enlisted on it was 2012.
No, 2011.
I enlisted in 2012, February 16th.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
So
I remember we talked in 2011. You're like, I'm signed up. I'm leaving, and then you had your day. Yeah.
And I was probably working with a recruiter at the time, but I remember I raised my right hand the day after my birthday, right? Okay. So that was kind of like a gift to myself, if you will, if you want to view it that way. So I've been in just over 13 years in a month.
Yeah.
Everybody's experience in the military is different, right? There's no linear path. Everything is kind of branching. Everybody's got a different set of circumstances, right? I've met sergeant majors who've never deployed.
Yeah.
And they're still sergeant majors, right? And then I've met people that have done 4 years, 6-year contracts, and they get out.
Yeah.
And they needed to.
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like I've been lucky to have the last 13 years that I had.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to be a recruiter or anything, but legitimately, I think about this from time to time. Joining the military is probably the single best life decision that I probably made.
Yeah. I remember it took you a while too, because you were thinking MP. You were thinking way back when I went in. There's a few guys that were thinking about it. I mean, you know, you wanted to be a cop at one point.
Yeah. So,
I mean, like a few people, that's what people go like MPs. And I remember you were talking about it. I think Dan Hesse was thinking about it. There's a few others I remember that were like, oh, I'm thinking about joining, you know, kind of in and out. I remember you were, you know, as it was like in and out.
Yeah,
I remember I told you, I was like, just do it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be over in a heartbeat. And then I was out. And then I was like, see, I'm out. Yeah. And then you obviously went in 2012. So,
Yeah, just do it, right? Like, that's kind of what it came down to. It was like, so for me, it was an opportunity to prove to myself that I could do something hard.
Yeah.
Right? On the more selfish side, it was also like I kind of was started to see what private health insurance looked like, and I really didn't want to have to afford that for my entire adult working life. So like that was like the selfish side of it. But I remember going to Fort Benning basic training, and like I went into this process super naive.
Yeah.
I didn't have anybody in my family that was military or had any kind of military linked experience, at least that I knew of, right? Mm-hmm. And so it kind of hit me when I was at basic training, like what it could mean to deploy, right? And like I was, you know, brought up with drill sergeants that had been rocking and rolling in tanks in Iraq, and they talked about missing the smell of the rounds going off, and like they were really glorifying it, and that's what they're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
They're supposed to get you like super hua on what you're doing.
Yeah.
But it dawned on me when I was there, like, okay, like this is for real. This is happening, and I'm gonna make it out of this, right? So I got through basic training. I think I was there spring through summer in Fort Benning, Georgia. Mm-hmm. Nasty.
How'd you get the tanker slot?
I sat down with the recruiter. My ASVAB score wasn't very good. I didn't study for it. I wasn't given study materials. I just went in and took the test. Mm-hmm. And so out of the two jobs that I could get based on my ASVAB score, I don't know if you've ever talked about ASVAB on your podcast before, but it's essentially a test with a series of tests.
Yeah.
And I ranked like super high in like analytical thinking and personability and all those things. And I ranked super low in like the ability to figure out like how to connect a wire and to do like electricity and how a gear turns XYZ knobs, right? And I'm terrible at math. So like that score was low.
Yeah.
So the recruiter said, well, you can either be a scout or you can be a tanker.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, I'm totally naive. And I said, well, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what does it mean to be a tanker? And so my recruiter, in all of his wisdom, pulled up a YouTube video and showed me a video of an Abrams tank running over a car in Iraq. And he was like, how cool does that look? Yeah, it could be you. And I was like, sign me up. Let's go. Right. And the rest is history. Like that's how I got the M1 slot.
Yeah.
So.
But did you say too, they were like, that was really coveted, but for some, like you were just lucky too. Like, because people were gunning for it, waiting for it. I remember you told me that once.
There was a few people.
And they were like, it opened right when you were like, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah. And then like, you just snatched it up real quick.
So the Minnesota Guard has, some tank units, right? And not every state has tanks. And so I think there was a slot that had just come open right when the recruiter got my scores and looked at what the slots that I could get into. And I picked it up and it was gone. And he was like, man, like, good for you, because we got a couple other recruits in here that were asking about 19. Maybe it was a sales line, right?
Yeah,
But at that point, it really didn't feel like it because he didn't have to say that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got it. And the weird thing is, in the National Guard, you have something called RSP, which I think still stands for Recruit Sustainment Program. Mm-hmm. I went to one RSP, and that's when you're still a civilian, you go to this program. And it's supposed to get you introduced to like military life and like what it's going to be like to get prepared for basic training. And you're doing physical fitness tests and you're learning how to march and you're doing drill and ceremony. I went to one of those and then boom, I was on an airplane off to Fort Benning.
Yeah.
And so it was wild. It felt super irrational and it happened really quick. Mm-hmm. And I think that was ultimately the way it was supposed to go. Because if I had thought about it too long, I might have really hated my decision.
Yeah.
And basic training is one of those things where boot camp for you, right?
Yeah.
You look back on it and you're like, oh yeah, I could do that again.
Yeah.
Especially as you get older, you're like, oh, I'd love to have a personal trainer yelling at me all the time.
Yeah.
In reality, it sucked.
Yeah.
Like when I was there in the moment,
right?
Every day feels long. It sucks, but like you look
Yeah.
back on it fondly because it's an experience that like you just wish you could relive again. Because like you meet people, and you have experiences, and the Army allows you to do some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Completely wild. Right.
Yeah.
Like we had kids that. And when I say kids, I was 25 when I joined.
Yeah.
Right. I was there with 18-year-olds, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't have a driver's license.
Yeah.
And the U.S. Army decides to put them in a 72-ton tank and teach them how to drive it, right?
Yep.
And I remember very specifically the day where that felt like a really bad idea was when one of our instructors like had to jump off the top of the tank while it was moving because he thought it was going to roll over because one of the recruits or privates or whoever that was driving the tank, like he legitimately thought that it was going to be out of control.
Yeah.
And he went and like blew out his knee or something. Like it was a bad
God.
deal.
Yeah,
it was a bad deal. But it just goes to show like you have to train them to be able to use these machines.
Yeah.
And ultimately their number one goal is to create death and destruction.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And it really sucks at the same time.
So what was life like being a tanker now? I mean, obviously it's guards, weekend warrior stuff, but like even then though, like what was the training like? What's it like getting into the tank, the culture inside the tank, all that shit?
Yeah, your crew is tight, right? So for those that are not familiar, when I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, I trained on what was called an M1 A2 SEP. Mm-hmm. What SEP stands for, I don't remember, but essentially when you're in the driver's hole, you've got a computerized system, right? And you can start the tank and you can turn the tank down, like turn it off, and it goes through a shutdown procedure. It takes like 2 minutes. So the driver is obviously responsible for driving it, but you're sitting back kind of in a cockpit, if you will, and you're leaned back and you've just got these two bars.
Yeah.
And you're revving it by just pulling back on the two bars and going left and right.
Yeah.
And it's wild. And you got like literally a brake like you'd have in a car.
Yeah.
Like, so when I got to Minnesota and started to see that like, oh, the National Guard isn't active duty. Yeah. And instead of being in the M1 A2 SEP, we were in the M1 A1 Abrams. I felt like we had just gone back 20 years. And like everything that we had in there was switches and knobs. Mm-hmm. And it was not at all like digitized, for lack of a better term. And so I kind of had to relearn the tank again.
Yeah.
From the driver's perspective, right? But when you're in a tank, it's the four of you. And the driver's kind of disconnected because they're in the hatch. And the turret turns from inside the body of the tank. So the driver is down below and the turret is spinning behind their head. Yeah. So you don't want to leave something in. You can crawl from the turret into your driver's hatch. Yeah. But you always want to make sure that they all know that you're in your seat. Yeah. And not at all in that crawl space. Yeah. Because you'd be dead. Yeah. It would just cut you in half when the turret turns, right? Yeah. And I've been around long enough to hear the stories of like, the soldier that accidentally left a rifle in between. Oh, and it crushed it. And the turret just destroyed the rifle, right? And like a rifle shouldn't even be in a tank anyway. So like that's a bad day at the office, right? Yeah. But the crew is tight. So you've got the driver who's ultimately responsible for maintaining the tank's movement, stopping, right? Like the controls. And then you've got 3 crewmen in the inside. So you have your loader. They're responsible for radios and physically loading the rounds into the main gun. Then you have your gunner. Your gunner is also effectively your assistant tank commander. And they're responsible for acquiring the targets, right? The whole deal, pulling triggers and making it go boom. And then you have the tank commander who's ultimately responsible for the entire tank, right? Yeah. And the tank commander and the gunner have a really tight relationship, but the tank commander literally sits right next to the loader. So they also have a really tight, that triangle is really tight. And typically your driver is the lowest ranked. So it'll be a E1, E2, E3. Your E4s are typically your loaders. Your NCOs or your E5s are higher. And then your tank commanders are typically E6s, E7s. So, but it's a tight-knit group. Like you're in the sweat, you're in the heat, right? You're doing your preventative checks and maintenances and services on the tank. Something goes wrong, something breaks down, like you're all working to fix that together, especially during a gunnery or something like that. The National Guard does a really good job of spending a lot of really quality time training before we get the crews in the tanks. So we would spend time in simulators, right? These little pop-up simulator stations that allowed us to really get our verbal commands. And I've been out of tanks for a little while now, so some of the commands I've lost, but gunner, sabo, tank, you get used to, okay, that's your tank commander saying, gunner, I want you to index or select sabo and our target is a tank, right? And then he might say something like fire, fire, can, which means fire okay, on the way, boom. And then you're going to fire a can round.
Okay.
You're going to fire a can. So fire can, right? That tells the loader, okay, he's going to fire the sabot. All right, fire can. I'm going to get the can round. And now, and again, this is all happening in a really quick, really loud environment. And you have, you have your helmet on, and you've got your earmuffs over, which is essentially an audio mic system, right? So you can hear everybody talking.
Yeah, live talk or whatever.
But the tank is so loud that like you naturally just hear it through. So you're trying to drown out the sound of the tank, the sound of it moving. You're trying to really focus on those commands, and things can get lost in translation.
Yeah.
But a really good tank crew kind of figures out a way to get the tank prepared to fight the tank. And when you get super proficient, you can go from, hey, we need to do our initial checks and services to, hey, we're ready to roll this thing in 30 minutes, right? And even faster if you're super proficient and super tight knit. And some of those tank groups were real tight.
Yeah.
I was jealous of some other tank crews because they were more close knit than my tank crew, right? So, but awesome experience. I think, tanking for me personally, I recognized that I liked it. I didn't love it, but I also recognized that I was around guys that tanking was in their blood. I'm talking guys had Abrams tattoos on their bodies, and all they wanted to do was be in tanks, work with tanks, maintenance tanks, shoot tanks, roll tanks, right? and when you're shooting it's when I was the driver, I always likened the round going off because you're the driver, right? And so you're in a static position, and that tank turret can be moving to your left or to your right. But when you're shooting at gunnery, typically it's going to be looking at a target and going a little bit left and a little bit right. Because when you're on the range, it can only...
Yeah.
So that thing's pretty much going off over your head the entire time.
Yeah.
So that main gun, you're sitting right below it.
Yeah.
It's maybe the closest thing to the power of God I've ever felt.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's to the point where when it goes boom, you can see the dust in the air lift up and kind of shake in front of you.
Yeah.
And then it resettles. And somebody told me once, if you were actually standing, in front of a tank, it would just blow you apart.
Yeah.
Because of the air pressure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I remember because I was in Iraq and a tank barrel swung over my head. I had an Abrams and I was next to it.
No
and I just
way.
prayed to God it wouldn't go. I was like, don't fire.
That's some...
Because it would fry me. I'd be dead.
Yeah.
I knew I'd be under a tank barrel. If it went off, I'd be fucked.
That's wild. I can't even believe that you guys
It
were
was
getting
in a
that close.
firefight. Yeah, we got into a big firefight.
I mean, granted, on tanks we have a I think they call it a troop radio.
Yeah, it's in the back, right?
Yeah, it's in the back.
I didn't even work with it. I'd heard about it, but when we got into this firefight, I'd never been around tanks. So now I'm running side by side with a fucking Abrams, through the streets, and I was like, I have no idea how to direct this thing.
If memory serves me right, it was just like a little kind of walkie.
Yeah, or something in the back, right?
Well, you open a door,
Yeah.
it talks to the crew on the inside. So again,
Yeah.
if you've got boots on the ground outside of the tank, they can talk to the crew.
Yeah.
Especially if they, hey, we got a target over here. Have you acquired it? Have you seen it? Or hey, get behind the tank, whatever. And we talked about that, right?
Yeah.
At the guard level, what do we do if we're in a deployed environment and we've got troops on the ground around us, right? And that's where you have the loader whose job is to really kind of check the outside of the tank. The tank commander is doing the same thing because they're both...
Are they out of the tank then? Their heads are up?
They're both typically standing,
Yeah.
and the tank commander can sit. There's really not a seat per se for the loader, but the loader is constantly standing, and they're outside.
Yeah.
Right? Their body is exposed. And in that position, in a training environment, you're always wearing your full protective equipment, right? PPE, as we call it, personal protective equipment, to make sure if you're going to take any rounds, you're not going to, hopefully it's going to save your life.
Yeah.
You're ultimately responsible for everything that happens in the tank and then what happens outside of the tank, right?
Yeah.
So, but tanking was great for a while. I mean, I realized after a while it wasn't in my blood the way it was for some other people. So ultimately I went and found something else. But I had the opportunity to go to the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, California. That was incredible, incredibly shitty.
Yeah.
But it was an incredible training opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. To be able to feel what it was like to be moved around like a pawn on a chessboard. Because that really is, when you've got armor elements, so whether it's a Bradley or an Abrams or a Striker or whatever it happens to be, you're just getting moved around so that other decision makers and leaders can fight the battle, right?
Yeah.
And for those, I don't know if you've talked about NTC before on here, but it's this huge sandbox in the desert of the Mojave. It's cold at night, and it's blisteringly hot during the day.
Yep.
And just to tease you, if you ever want to go AWOL, you can look in the distance and you can see the Luxor Hotel shooting its big light up from the desert. So if you are going to just take off and say, I'm done, I can't have any more, I'm breaking down, you just follow the light of the Luxor, and you'll eventually, if the scorpion doesn't get you, or the snake doesn't get you, or the spider doesn't get you, you'll eventually find your way to the Vegas Strip.
So, I mean, like, what do you guys do during, like, how do you live and sleep in a tank? You know what I mean? Like,
oh, good question. Sleeping in a tank is incredibly hard because there is just no soft surface inside of a tank.
Yeah.
So on the long nights, I remember being, up at Camp Ripley and just falling asleep with my head in my, helmet, just propped up against a corner of the tank, in which might not allow my head to move too much.
Yeah.
When we were at NTC, for example, though, when we were kind of buttoning down for the night, we would actually sleep on the front slope of the tank. You really didn't want to be sleeping on the back over the engine because it would be too hot. At least after you initially shut the tank down, you had to give it like an hour and a half before you could actually lay on that thing and not burn yourself.
Yeah.
So there's a rack on the back of an Abrams if you've ever seen one. So we would have soldiers sleeping in the rack if it wasn't being used for storage. But like at NTC, for example, 3 of us would sleep on the front skirt, and we actually would get our sleeping bags out, and we would sleep in the cold, and it was great because we were super tired. We might only get 2 or 3 hours of sleep, but the sleep that we got felt amazing because we had just gone from. So at NTC, I think on any given day, it was about 120 degrees outside. As the gunner in the tank at the time, when I was at NTC, it was about, I think the electrical system probably adds, and I'm guessing here, but it probably adds around 30 degrees of heat. So if it's 120 outside, just imagine it's closer to 140, 145, somewhere in that range, right? Give or take, inside the hole, because you're in the lowest section. And granted, the drivers also got it pretty hot, but they're not surrounded by all of the electrical the way you are inside the turret. It got to the point where I remember looking up at my tank commander, and I just said, hey, Sergeant, like, I'm going to pretty much be down in my underwear down here so that I don't like fall out. And that just means have like a heat issue, right? Yeah. He goes, I don't care what you do, just don't fall out. Just hang in there, right? And so you'd go from this extreme discomfort to putting your uniform on before you get out of the hole and preparing for your cold sleep on the skirt, and you just couldn't wait. Right? Because that's the front of the tank. We called it the skirt. And it felt great. Yeah. But, it was 3 hours, 4 hours.
No, I've been there, man. So then like the 1-2 hours, you're like, geez, that was amazing. That's all you need. So did you guys have like fun shooting the rounds and shit like that? Or what was
so, every tank crew goes through a gunnery. With a gunnery, you go through, it's very much like with any weapons system in the Army, you have qualification tables. So you're going to go through table 1 all the way through table 6. And so the goal, right, in my guard career, was to qualify a first time go. That means your first time attempting it, you get to go on table 6, which is the last table. And the tanking tradition is if your crew qualifies as a first time go, the tank commander buys the crew their boots. Now in the Army, tankers are, to my knowledge, the only MOS that has their own specialized boot. Yeah, I think so, yeah. And if you've ever seen a tanker boot before, they're essentially, I believe it's 2 straps or buckles that you pull a strap around your foot and you buckle it into place. And the reason for that is if you have a fire in the turret or if there's some type of chemical issue, you can very quickly unstrap your boots to get out. Fun fact, tankers don't bring M4s in there. They only bring 9mm. That's our primary weapon. So my entire time as a tanker, which was 5 years, I never actually shot an M4 outside of basic training because you just don't have room in a tank typically for an M4. So an M9, the Beretta at the time, was our primary. Yeah. Pretty interesting, right? And it would get a little bit dark sometimes. People would say, well, what that's really used for is if you're getting overrun by the enemy.
Yeah.
You can use it on them or you can use it on yourself, right? Depending on how bad this is. That's pretty dark.
Yeah.
But I digress. Where was I going with that? I'm rambling now.
How like the accomplishments and good, like running the tanks and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, the tank tables. So
Yeah.
I very specifically, this is seared in my brain. I remember this like it was yesterday. My tank commander really wanted to get his boots. I think that he was in E7 at the time, so Sergeant First Class, and he knew that I think his time in tanks were going to end soon, and that he was going to.
So he'd never gotten them.
Well, he hadn't had them yet.
Yeah.
And so he had crews before, but table 6 first time go is not given to you. This isn't like you can spend years trying to get a first time go on table 6. It means that everything goes so smoothly that to the point you've qualified to a proficient level that the Army says is you've hit, I don't know what the number is. Let's just say 8 out of 10 targets or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're shooting day and you're shooting night. And so your 2 scores for day shoot and night shoot add up. And everybody's involved. This isn't just the main gun going off. Your loader has a 240, which is a machine gun. The main gun next to it has, I believe, a 240 machine gun, right? Then you have the main gun, and then the tank commander has a 50 cal. Mm-hmm. So during your day shoot and your night shoot, at least during the day shoot, every weapon system is eventually engaged during those qualification events. Mm-hmm. At night, I believe it's just the main gun because it's too hard to acquire targets at night otherwise. So it requires your gunner to be really good. Mm-hmm. So in order to get, it's kind of like if you want to win a championship, right? Like you have to have a combination of the right players. In order to qualify first time go on table 6, you have to have a qualification. Like you have to have a really good combination of people that are doing their job very highly at a proficient level. Mm-hmm. And man, I'll never forget this. This is... I liken it to like that Snickers commercial where like, somebody wants to get out of a situation and take a bite of it and it would say, want to get away. I don't know if you ever remember those ads. We were shooting table 6 and we had really done a good job of practicing. We call them fire drills. I think that's what they're called anyway. Mm-hmm. Again, it's been a number of years since I was in tanks, but we would literally sit in chairs and tank commander would call out a command. The gunner would repeat back what he needed to do. The loader would come in and he would say whatever. And then for the loader, they have to literally arm or disarm the main gun. So the gunner is listening for the loader to say up. And if he says up, that means the main gun is now off of safe and it's hot.
Yeah.
So anything, now they also have to be indexed, which means they have to have the right round selected based on the command that came from the tank commander. And then they have to be willing to not only fire that round, so squeeze the triggers, call them Cadillacs, and then they have to hit the target.
Yeah.
And we have to hit multiple targets during an engagement. Mm-hmm. And so, and some of them even, if memory serves me right, you have to hit movers too, right? So they don't make it easy.
Yeah.
So there we are. We had a very successful table 6 so far, and our practices were on point. We felt really good going in. And the tower, the people that are overseeing the qualification, they don't tell you what's coming. And it's funny because like you see the politics kind of take place behind the scene where like all the tank crews are hanging out in a classroom or whatever. And they're trying to share the secrets and they're trying to figure out how they're going to qualify. They're, what did you hear? What was your whatever? But in reality, like when you go out there, all sorts of things can go wrong. So... And I'm pretty sure I remember the verbiage pretty closely. I was anticipating a verbal command, and we were rocking and rolling, and we're at one of the very last pieces of our table 6 qual. And I heard gunner can tank, and I grabbed the can round. Now keep in mind the tank commander is focused on his stuff, so he probably didn't hear the ammo door. Because there's an ammo door that opens and you pull the round out and you put it in the gun tube, right? Like that's how it goes. And then the breech block goes up, it covers the round so it can go shooting out of the...
Yeah.
I heard gunner can tank, whatever. In reality, it was gunner coax troops.
Yeah.
Well, gunner coax is that 240.
Yeah.
troops is like there's troops on the ground that you're going to be shooting at. So it was fire, whatever, gunner coax troops. I heard gunner can troops.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm having flashbacks. PTSD is, I think what they officially call this at the VA.
Yeah.
But I grabbed the round, slung it over, and you have to, in order to be a qualified crew, you have to do it within like 3 to 4 seconds. Yeah. And that's from opening the door, getting it out and into the round.
Yeah.
And then boom, upping that main gun lever.
Yeah.
And the second I said up, my tank commander who's sitting for me.
Yeah.
Looks over at me and he goes, "You dumb." And I won't say it. You know, there was some vulgar language used, and my face, I just was like,
yeah.
And instantly I just wanted to just disappear.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly what went wrong. It was coax. And, you know, it was an anticipation thing. My brain heard one thing, and I was so excited to just get through, and I really wanted those boots.
Yeah.
So I might have said it just earlier, I don't remember, but everything in my mind happens for a reason. I firmly believe that, you know, and for some people, they believe in God, they believe in luck, they believe in fate. The round jammed in the main gun. And so we had to effectively, the a canister round, by the way, I keep referring to it. Just imagine it's got like 1,000, I think it's like 900 odd something, little tungsten balls. Mm-hmm. So when this round hits the ground, it buckshots these round balls. Yeah. So like I was at Ripley once and I saw a can round hit a whole bunch of deer. Yeah. And all you could see on the thermos was just,
yeah, really.
And it was just, it was blood and thermo. Just, right. Like it was wild. But you know, they tell you don't shoot the bears, don't shoot the deer, like don't engage them. But if they're in the way, they're in the way, right? Yeah. Anyway, so somehow, by the grace of God, whatever you want to call it, the round got jammed. And so we had to index, which means call a stop to the exercise. So now things went from bad for me to worse. Because now not only did we get docked points because I had a crew error, which could cost us our table 6 boots, but now we had to stop the engagement because the round was stuck. Yeah. And my tank commander was so mad that he didn't like look at me. None of this, right? Like, so I am dejected and I still have a job to do. So like, this is where the beauty of the military really shines through, right? Is like you can be in the worst case scenario, and you know this better than I do, and you still have to accomplish the mission. You still got to fight the tank. We safely get the round out, and that's kind of it's a training round, but it still has the balls. It's still, you know, it's a live round. Yeah. We got it out, unclogged the jam, and they just told us to sit there and wait. Are they going to pull us off the range? Are we in trouble? Whatever. The tower came back with whatever our crew name was at the time. They said, hey, given that the round stuck in there and in whatever time went by, we are going to have you restart that engagement for record. And they said something similar to that, which essentially was like my golden ticket out of proverbial hell, right? Exactly, it meant like, oh, we get a chance to do that again. And when my tank commander heard that,
he's like, "You ready, dumb bitch?"
And everything we say on the radio is recorded, right? So he's just like, and I was just like, very quickly trying to like, whatever. So everything goes smooth. We shoot it, we get through it, whatever. And
did you coaxial then, or did it go to?
It was coax.
No, I mean for the second engagement. So
it was the same script. It was gunner coax. So I just sat there like this, and made sure that he saw that I wasn't moving.
Yeah, he's like looking back at you.
And we get out of the tank, and we don't know how we did, because the tower has to take all your scores. They have to take all your stuff. And what's really cool is they bring you down to the after action review room, which is the AAR room. And they have a recording in the tower, like, to show you how your tank shot, because they're recording your tank and you're listening to the audio commands. You're listening to your crew commands the entire time. Yeah. And I think it was in that room we found out that we had enough points to get our boots.
Yeah.
And everybody was relieved, and I was still, I think, like trying to clean up the mess in my pants, right? Because I was still just beside myself because I don't like to make mistakes. I really don't make errors, but when I'm operating in a mission set, like errors are not your friend, right? And so, again, the military is a really fantastic environment sometimes because we got out of the AAR room and we had to get back into our tank and we had to pull it off of the range and we had to go park it in the motor pool and get it out so the next crew could come through and do their thing. And my tank commander literally just, they're father figures to you, especially when you're young in the military, right? Like these guys they're your own personal god because everything they say goes. You don't violate their rules. It's their tank. They run the show. He walked up to me and he put his arms over my shoulder, kind of like a dad to a son. And he goes, Skinner, I think I was an E4 at the time. He goes, I'm not mad at you for making a mistake. The reality is everybody's going to make a mistake and we can't often choose when it happens. Right. And I'm paraphrasing, but my memory is pretty clear on this. So these are almost his exact words. And he goes, I was really concerned that we had a can round jammed in the main gun. Because God forbid the gunner hits the wrong button or pulls that trigger and that round is jammed and that firing pin hits it. I don't want to think about what could have happened.
Yeah.
And so kind of like when I was in basic training and I had that like, oh shit moment where like, oh, I could get deployed and I could go be in an active war zone, which you had already experienced. That was like a big moment for me where it was like, man, and I think for some soldiers, the light turns on, right? Like that was my moment where I was like, every piece of training matters. Right? Like everything that you're training for, it oftentimes doesn't make sense at first. You don't understand how you get from point A to point D and point, E, whatever. But that's when I was like, okay, his swearing was mainly more out of concern than it was. It wasn't to belittle me, right?
Yeah.
And to his word, right? We go home and you leave your drill status and you go back into the civilian world, and I got a random text message that says, what's your boot size?
Yeah.
And I think he learned the hard way that tanker boots are pretty expensive because we ended up, instead of the tank commander buying everybody their boots, which is 2, 4, 6, 8 pairs of 8 total boots, right? 4 pair. We split the bill with him.
Yeah.
So I bought one boot, he bought the other.
Yeah.
And I still have those boots in my built-in shelf in my basement next to a Sabo round AF cap, which is just it's the bottom part of the round. I acquired that tactically somehow. I forget how that happened, right? Of course. But I've got them next to my boots, and 19 kilo with tanker armored crewman is still one of my MOSs, right? I have 2 now. So as far as I'm concerned, I, by Army regulation, could still wear boots.
Yeah.
But I'm not in a tank crew anymore, and I'm not operating in that way. So, would I like to wear them? Yeah, but I think it would kind of dishonor tankers that are still having to tame the beast, if you will, and maintain it and fight it and shoot it. And so I've just decided to leave them on the shelf as a reminder. But tanking it's awesome 10% of the time. It's the coolest, best job in the military. 90% of the time it sucks.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the maintenance. It's doing all the other bullshit.
It's when you throw track.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever seen I have photos of thrown track and just the nightmare it is. Like everything stops for 4 hours and you're pulling out your training manual, the TM, and you're literally trying to figure out like, okay, how do I reconnect this track that just came disconnected and is now deadlined our tank? And it's heavy and you're pulling out this crazy, you're pulling out bars and just really, really big equipment to try to reconnect this track. And then you have to do it right. And then you got to run the tank, and it's a nightmare. And when we would shoot gunneries at annual training, even like the running joke was who's going to hot seat whose tank. And that just means your tank's going to go down because tanks break all the time, especially I think maybe more so in the Guard because they sit between months in sheds, right? Like they're not being used as consistently as maybe they are in an active duty environment. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it breaks down. So you'd be going through a gunnery cycle, and let's say you showed up with 8 tanks. Before you know it, you're down to 3 operational tanks, and all of the crews are just jumping into that tank that works, and it's called hot seating. You're just jumping into the hot seat, right?
Yeah.
Which is sweaty, stinky, nasty, right? It's a hot seat for a reason. So by the end of an annual training, for example, we were down to 3 operational tanks, which is
what were the tank crews then?
Terrible.
Or you're jumping into it just a different
You're just jumping into the crew that just came off the line. You're bringing it back through to the fuel point. You're going back through to the ammo point, and then you're getting back online.
Yeah.
And you better hope they did a good job of zeroing the tank, because you're now shooting it for potentially a qualification.
So you guys using is it like laser rangefinders within the tank, or are you guys doing like optics or some shit?
Yeah.
Like
so
that,
each tank, right, when you're looking down the scope, you can hit it's called a laze button, and it gives you the total distance for the target. So that's one of the things that you're calling out in the command is you're calling out how many
meters.
Yeah, what your total
yards.
distance is going to be. Yeah. So and again, it's been so long since I was in a crew, I forget a lot of the verbiage. It's interesting though, because I wasn't a big fan of the movie Fury.
I was going to ask you about that. I love Fury. I think it's a phenomenal movie.
A lot of tankers liked it.
Well, I think it's
because it was a tanker movie, right? And there's a few of them out there. I think there's one called like Thunder Run that was also, I think, was designed around like 91's main Iraq invasion.
Oh, okay.
Under Colin Powell, I think.
Okay.
I could be totally wrong on that, but
you got to check out The Beast.
The Beast. I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
It's a Soviet. It's Americans. I think it's like Billy Baldwin or one of the Baldwin brothers. I think Skarsgård, the father.
Yeah.
They're a Soviet or they're a Russian tank crew get lost in Afghanistan, and it's just their single T-72 tank rolling through. It's a great movie. Like it came out in like the 80s. I think it was like 1988 or something like that. It's a great movie.
I'll have to look for that one.
Yeah.
I liked the fact that in Fury, the commands that they were using amongst themselves as a crew.
What does he say? What does Shia LaBeouf say? I can't. He's like and one or send one. What does he say?
I don't know.
I'm like,
it's
I
been
have to
too
like,
long since I've seen it.
I have to like subtitle it.
No idea.
Like, I saw the movie, I was like, this is great, and I was like, what the fuck is he saying?
But some of the verbiage that they used in the movie, kind of like that. I'm like, what did he say? Or I remember having that because I saw it in the theater. I remember having that thought, like I don't recognize that, but I'd say 80% of what we used to this day, or when I was in tanks. You could hear it in Fury, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Because it just shows that they really paid attention to like the inner workings of a tank crew. Now, the rest of it was over dramatized, super Hollywood. Like it was just too.
Do it, Norm.
It was too much.
Do it, Norm. It's my favorite scene.
Too much.
Do it, Norm.
I don't know. For me, it was kind of ruined when you saw the tank crew guy at the end of the movie. He's like hanging out under his tank, trying not to be seen. And I think it was like a German or something like found him under there, just let him live. And I was like, come on, that would never, he wouldn't just decide not to kill that one. Right. But it was a fine movie. It was cool because I was able to hear the verbals, and it was awesome to know that like it was still very similar to what it is today.
Yeah.
Right? So like I said, tanks are like 10% awesome, best job in the world. 90% suck is what I like to call it. Yeah. They're incredibly dangerous, right?
I would imagine, dude. I've seen the videos. I mean, like I said, when I was running around in Iraq in that firefight, I was like, dude, you could this thing will fucking crush me. Like, they could shoot the main gun. I don't even know if it knows I'm there. Yeah. I mean, it was chaos when we were next to it. I remember it.
I can't imagine being being in your position, right? Because like we were always happy to be in a moving vehicle, right? And we had
what was awesome.
We had armor to protect us.
I felt invincible. Like next to it, I was like, dude, no one can fucking destroy me. Like you felt like gods. Everyone's like, dude, we got a tank next to us. Like, it felt amazing to have it there. But then it was also kind of like, I've seen video too of like even the ISIS fight where like some of the volunteers almost get run over by it's going backwards and they're using it as cover. But then like one of them gets shot in the leg and he has to like limp, keep going because otherwise he's gonna get. And it's a slow roll, but it's like you're gonna get crushed by a tank. Like you got some Iraqi fucking driving it backwards slowly, but they're not gonna stop for you. So it's like, and then obviously too with like the Ukraine war, you're like situational awareness type stuff. It's like I don't know what kind of optics you guys you know what I mean, like what's your situational awareness inside of a tank? Like you're rolling down the road and you're seeing javelins getting shot at, Russian Soviet tanks. And you're seeing a lot of tank warfare play out. Like you're like, Jesus, man, these guys are getting ambushed left and right. Like a tank column of 8 isn't as well. It's still intimidating, but if you got javelins lined up or NLAWs, dude, you don't know what's coming at you. It's like that. You know what I mean? Like it's just weird.
Yeah. So to your point, like your tank commander and your loader are outside of the tank, but if you're in like
an engagement,
when I say outside, like they're standing halfway, which they're inside the tank, but their body is exposed, right? Well, if you're taking active contact, like I believe the operating procedure, and I think we practiced this at the National Training Center, was you're battening down your hatches. You're literally pulling it closed because now I need that layer of armor.
Yeah.
And now, really, in order to see, you've got the camera system that sits on top, and it's kind of right in front of the tank commanders. Mm-hmm. So he's got something of a camera system, but you're not going to see all the details right off to your left or all the details to your right. And it's one of the reasons why we would practice like tank maneuvers, and we would do this in really cool simulators, right? Where we would be in a simulator, but the tank commander could see kind of like to their left and right on a digital screen, and then back in the other trailer or truck or whatever, they can see perfectly how we're doing our flanks or our wedges or our T formations. Like they're able to see how we're keeping online, and you're doing that by looking left and right out of these little windows or blocks that you have. And so for the tank commander to see outside the tank, there's these little blocks about this big, and you're staring out of them, and you're just trying to it's not much, right? Yeah. And the driver has that too, but the driver might have dust or mud or all sorts of stuff. So that visibility is pretty
shot.
So the ideal situation is to not be in contact, be able to have your head out, looking left and right. Yeah. So,
well, it's cool to see the design holding up against like the FPV drones. Like, because the Soviet tanks or the Russian tanks are getting chewed up by them, even the new ones, like the, I don't know, fucking whatever, new model. But then like the Abrams is beginning to hit, but they get hit like 4 or 5 times before they finally give way. Like, it's like you're seeing the armor design like working, even in some of the tank battles like that they're getting into. It's like, no, these things can actually take a beating. The Russian ones aren't. They're taking like 1 round and they're done. Whereas like the Abrams are actually like holding their own,
To my knowledge, and again, I'm not like a tank expert. I don't want to come on here and like advertise that I'm some tank guru or something. Yeah. I just happen to be an armored crewman, but the tanks themselves are pretty modular. So like you can put different types of armor kits on a tank, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it could be 72 tons fully kitted, or maybe it's 60 tons without a kit, right? Yeah. So you've got the ability to be able to put different armor sets to be able to that was the cool thing with like even the M1A1, like they were able to upgrade some of our optics systems over the years that I was in tanks. And I remember we would have civilian contractors come in and they would talk about this new system they were putting on or whatever. So it's what I'm getting at is it's a tried and true platform, right? And that track platform is used for other types of military vehicles. It just doesn't have a turret on it with the main gun that makes it a tank, right? But yeah, you feel incredibly safe in there, but you also often see like it's about maneuvers and it's about how you fight your tank, right? So like the Russians, NTC is NTC. I've talked a little bit about that, but I had an opportunity to go play what we call Op4 in the military, which is opposing forces. Mm-hmm. So I think this was in 2016, maybe 17. Mm-hmm. They came to the Guard and they said, hey, we have an opportunity to send you to Boise, Idaho. And you're going to go play Op4, opposing forces. And the way they sold it to us, because they needed volunteers, was ridiculous. They're like, oh yeah, when you're Op4, anything goes. Like you can grow your beard, you can whatever, like you can have facial hair, like whatever. Like these were real conversations people were having. And maybe they thought they were telling
infantry
the truth.
ones you can.
Sure.
Infantry Op4 does that.
For tankers.
I was going to say, like, you're in a tank.
Like, we're in a tank. So I'm thinking, I'm going to, like, get an M4 and I'm going to run around in the woods. Like, and they didn't know all the details. No, but by the time the mission came around, here's what it was. They attached us to the active duty to play Op4, and we were in Idaho to train effectively the Idaho National Guard in tank maneuvers. Now, were they going downrange, right, into a theater? I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But to my level of understanding, we were there attached to active duty to train the Idaho National Guard. So my assumption was they're probably going to go downrange with their tanks, because otherwise, why would the active duty be doing that? Now, maybe it was a joint exercise, and in Idaho,
In
the
16
space
probably,
allows for it, right?
like they're just doing their
Rotation maybe somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So that was a cool experience. Like, we're sleeping again in a desert environment in Idaho, and you're in huge tents. And it was my first time seeing an actual like Army field kitchen that your kitchen and your cooks are working out of a trailer. And it was my first time ever seeing like field laundry, where a Humvee comes by, picks up your laundry bag, and you just pray to God that it's there when that Humvee drops off your clean laundry later, and taking showers in a field laundry tent or a field shower tent, right? So it was an active duty environment. It was an active duty mission, and we're sleeping hundreds of soldiers in a tank on nothing but cots, right? And we were there for just shy of a month, which the National Guard loves to do, because then they don't have to pay you BAH, right? Which is, for those of you that don't, it's your basic housing allowance, or whatever the official terminology is.
Which is like $1,600-$1,700 worth of stuff. Yeah.
They cut your orders just short enough to not have to pay you, which is always lovely, right?
Yeah.
But that experience was maybe the best and worst time in my tank career. And I don't think I lasted long after that. So the cool thing about being in Boise in Idaho was the fact that when I left, because every day, so a Modge Podge of tankers from Minnesota joined this mission to play opposing forces. So I'm working with people in crews that I didn't really know. One guy from my unit ended up being in my tank. He was E5, a sergeant at the time. I was an E4, I believe. So we essentially put on this laser tag kit. I think it's called Miles gear or whatever. So we're playing laser tag. So we're not shooting real rounds. We're not, but everything that we're doing is to simulate a real environment. So to your point about like seeing a tank for the first time and like kind of being, oh man, this is a tank. Like I feel safe, right? When we would pull out of the motor pool, we would have active duty soldiers like stop and watch the tanks leave. And I came to find out that like a lot of these active duty soldiers had never actually seen tanks in person before, which to me was wild.
Yeah, because you're used to that. Yeah.
Because you think from a National Guard perspective, like the active duty Army sees all the things all the time. The reality is the active duty Army is a lot like the National Guard, right? They all have their little areas they work in and their areas of expertise, and they also come together for deployments or for training exercises, and they just hadn't seen them. So we kind of felt like little low-key celebrities every time we were on these tanks, rolling out, waving at the people, right, and going out into the box for. And for this, we were always out early in the morning, and we were back kind of later at night. Yeah. But we were sleeping in the tent every night, which was nice. Unlike NTC, where you're out for 14 days straight, no showers.
That's the beauty of Op4. They're like, you go out. Sometimes they're like, all right, let's go back.
Now the other guys, right? The Idaho National Guard, they might have been out in the box for 14 days. I don't know, but it wasn't us. Anyway, so the awesome thing about it was we were working these tanks so hard and so often, they weren't breaking down.
Yeah.
And it was because before every movement, I had a really high speed tank commander, and I think he's a mechanic on the civilian side. So one of the underrated things that people don't really acknowledge about the National Guard is like, I think it's maybe the most educated fighting force in the world.
Yeah, no, I say that all the time. Like they're not the most disciplined or like when it comes to regulations and stuff, but even in combat roles, they're there to do that mission. And then before in the workup going into combat, like the guys we work with, dude, they do like a 4-month workup package. You imagine like being shit hot and sharp as a tack and like, sharp as a knife, and then be like, all right, now you deploy. Where in the active duty, it's like, oh yeah, we'll get them training here. And they wait a few months, get some training here. We're going to do, we'll do another workup, but it's always like lackluster. And then the guard guys that I talked to that deployed into combat zones, they're like, dude, we do like 6-month workups. Or like, and they are honed in. Now, like I said, they're not the best in shape. They're not the best like looking, but they know what they're doing.
It's a more focused operational mindset. Like, okay,
they're also civilians. They know how to like run businesses. Right. So everything, your first sergeant all the way down to your private has a job. So like outside of this, so the National Guard boys know how to get shit done and they know how to do it proficiently. like they're like, hey, we need to go home at the end of the day.
And look, like I've met some incredible active duty soldiers, some incredible National Guard soldiers. I still work with a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
But for me, you know, and I've gone to a couple of the NCOA schools where the NCO academies, right? BLC, Basic Leaders Course, and ALC, Advanced Leaders Course. I've gone to both of those. I've met some National Guard people that are incredible or not so hot, right? Not so great. I've met some incredible active duty soldiers. I've also met some active duty soldiers that have no social skills whatsoever, and who just you could tell the civilian world doesn't register to them because they got in when they were younger. They don't know what it is to talk in an office environment. They don't understand how to nuance themselves through a conversation. I've seen some of them get really frustrated really quick because things just aren't going their way. And you can't do that in the civilian sector. You literally need to play office politics sometimes, or you need to be a salesperson, or you need to be technically sound at what you do so that you can get your stuff. It's just a different thing. Like, how many active duty soldiers have I talked to? And a few who have been like, yeah, when I came out of active duty, I thought I was ready to transition, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
The transition programs did not get me prepared for interviewing for civilian jobs for anything.
Yeah. No.
Right. And so these aren't skills that they're learning when they're in the Army. The Army isn't teaching them how to get ready for civilian life.
Yeah.
But for a National Guard soldier, they're already in civilian life and they have to get ready to be able to be as proficient as their active duty counterparts when things hit the fan. And I got a story about that too. Maybe we'll get to it later. But where were we?
Talk about Idaho.
Okay. Idaho. So we're doing OP4, we're rolling out, we're kind of like celebrities and everybody's looking at us like, oh, that's really cool. Well, we got really, really proficient. I mean, I could go from opening my training manual, right, the TM, and going through all the steps of the PMCS, preventative maintenance checks and services, to having them committed to memory so that I could get in the tank and I could just run through the checklist. And we could have that tank ready to roll in as quick as 15 minutes at times, right? And I would even pop out of the tank, and the loader does the majority of the work. I'm responsible for the radios. I'm responsible for greasing all of the little, we call them zerts, little grease zert or an insert in the tank or on the track to make sure that there's enough grease, because those tracks eat through grease, right?
Yeah.
And you have to get rid of the old grease and put new grease in. And you have to have grease guns and grease packets. And it's wild, right? But I'd get out there and I could boo, do the entire track in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Ready to roll, right?
PCCs and PCIs, that's what we called it.
PCCs, PCIs, pre-combat checks, pre-combat inventories, right?
Yeah.
So you're doing, well, we would do those
you
checks.
You guys are much more intensive than ours. We were like, check your ammo, make sure you have water.
And for us,
radio,
it's
batteries,
hey, we literally have to put the turret through an exercise to make sure that it's moving the way it's supposed to, right? And you watch the main gun go, and all sorts of things. So I got super proficient. When I left Boise, I felt like I was the most proficient tanker as I'd ever had been before. And you could put me in an active environment and I would probably know more, faster, smarter, arguably not as strong, but you get my point, faster, smarter, stronger than any active duty soldier. I was on that tank all the time. I knew it like the back of my hand. It was the best part of the development for me. It was better than NTC. NTC was just a grind and it was dangerous and you take risks that you shouldn't take and your fatigue levels are so bad that you can't even retain the information you're supposed to anymore. It's designed to be like that. Boise was different. We were an opposing force. We really got to know our tank.
Also, mentality is a little different too. You're not the weight is not on you anymore.
We were the on call, to your point. Yes, we were on call. So when Idaho was ready to re-engage or rerun, we called them the lane. So if you take a big sandbox and you create little lanes in the sandbox, we're going to run down that lane, right? We would then be there to ruin their day.
Yeah.
Right.
How was that?
Oh, it was incredible because we got to see, so Minnesota loves to talk about this, the Minnesota Guard, how our reputation precedes us and how proficient we are and how highly respected we are. Well, the reality is it's true.
Yeah. No, I've heard it too. I was at division headquarters, at the legit, the higher commands are 34 ID has their shit locked on.
Yeah.
We just do.
Yeah. And I have a really cool story from an Army chaplain that I heard that kind of speaks to that. But we were very good at destroying the Idaho National Guard. Like they're, not to speak disparaging of them, but like let's just say there was room for improvement. Like they'd be rolling down a lane in a straight column. And so all we had to do was sit there, crest up over a hill and go pink, 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 pink. Now, granted, we're using like a laser system to tell them that they're dead. And then they would go back and they would readjust and they would try to come in differently or they would try to whatever. Well, that was like the 10% of armying that was awesome and tanking, right? Like, okay, so I had gone through gunnery. I already had my boots on. That was sweet. I had proved that I knew what I was doing when it came to a gunnery and shooting the thing. Now we can prove that we know what we're doing when it comes to maneuvers and lethality, right? The coolest moment that I had feeling validated as a tanker, I was standing in line for the shower. My tank commander was right behind me, and the line was, I don't know, 40, 50 Joes deep. And the three guys in front of us were from active duty, and they were in one of the other tanks that we had been attached to. And they didn't know who we were. They hadn't seen us. They only knew our call sign.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying like, hey, Red 1, those guys are shit hot.
Yeah.
I would go to war with them any day. I didn't think the National Guard knew what they were doing. And I just looked back at my tank commander like,
Yeah.
and he was just beaming, right? Because like he had an ego too. You have to have an ego to do this job.
Yeah, yeah.
And he specifically, he knew the mechanical end of the tank. He was a savant. Now, again, he's an engineer on the civilian side. Like, not an engineer. He was a mechanic on the civilian side. So, like, for him, when we threw track, fixing it, like, it made his day.
Yeah.
Because he could open it up, he could learn it in the manual, and then he could, like, direct traffic, and we all got the tank back moving again, right? Like, he loved it, but it was a 4-hour procedure, and it sucked.
Yeah.
But to have that validation and to know that our active duty brothers and sisters thought that we were good to go. Yeah. Was the highest high that I ever had. Like getting my boots, that was incredible. Yeah. But it came with a lot of pain, growing pains, right? And fear. This was just like, okay, I've arrived. I'm a tanker now. Like it was this awesome feeling. Fast forward, I can't tell you how many days, but we were there almost a month. We were engaging the opposing force. Our tank was chasing a Bradley. We may have been breaking range speed. Not pointing fingers, just saying. Yeah. That's not my call to make, right? And the driver didn't see it. The tank commander didn't see it. But in the desert, you have these things called wadis.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, and there's wadis at NTC. And look, we were told, like, at NTC even, every rotation, there's typically a real life fatality. Yeah. Like a soldier.
No, they do. Like they don't talk about it, but people die. But at 29 Palms as well, like Marine Corps. Yeah. Like they don't tell anybody about it, but like unless it's like really bad, but people die like every year at NTC, at 29 Palms, at CAX.
I had a drill sergeant that went on to serve at NTC and died in a rollover with their Humvee. Yeah. You know, what a lot of people don't realize is that in the military, the training environment is where the vast majority of the casualties take place, right? Like war fighters die in war sometimes, but they're more likely to have an accident that either causes, and when we talk about casualties, it doesn't necessarily mean fatality. A casualty could just be someone who's injured. Yeah. Right. But a lot of the casualties will happen in a training environment, and that's kind of the unadvertised, right? So when we tell people, hey, we're going on for training. Okay, well, the expectation is you're going to come back or you're going to be okay. I wasn't anticipating like things changing a lot while I was, on this Op 4 mission, but we went into a wadi. So again, we may have been breaking range speed, and then all of a sudden the tank went into a ditch. Yeah. Now, the second the tank went into the ditch, everything came to a stop. I mean, we went down, right? The whole tank went. Yeah. At the moment that the tank stopped, I was leaning up over my hatch, and I was grabbing the ammo can from the tank commander's 50 cal that he had just emptied. So what I had done was I grabbed the new can, loaded in the ammo, closed the feed tray, and I was grabbing the old can, and I was dropping down back into the hatch to put the empty can where the empty can goes, right? Mm-hmm. And as we hit the wadi, the second we hit the wadi, I had just brought my face level with the hatch, the lip of the hatch.
Yeah.
So imagine you have a 60, 70 ton tank coming to a full and abrupt stop.
Yeah.
So my head very violently went like that.
Yeah.
Right into the hatch. I said earlier, I've always believed everything happens for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. Like you've had near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. I have in different ways.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't in a war zone, thank God. I firmly believe that if I wasn't wearing goggles, so I had the goggles on. The goggles met the hatch straight on. I still have them in my garage. They've still got blood on them.
Yeah.
I'd either be dead, severely paralyzed, severely deformed. My nose is a little bit crooked as a result. You probably can't tell. Yeah. But they did at the hospital. They were like, yeah, it looks like his nose might be a little bit moved. Oh, what? Right?
Yeah.
So I hit this thing, full speed, full stop. The only reason I was wearing the goggles was because the day before, my gunner was like, hey, you're probably getting sick and tired of having that sand get in your eyes, aren't you? Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah. He's like, you want my goggles? Just take them for the rest of the time we're here. The day before, I was given the goggles. And the day after, they likely saved my life. Mm-hmm. At least major brain damage or deformity, right? Like, so I remember... I just remember everything going black.
Yeah.
And I woke up in like a stoop inside the hole. So I was coming down, I hit my head, and then I obviously fell into some fashion. And when I came to, my face hurt so bad. My first thought in my brain was, all of your teeth are gone. Just don't scream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I took my eyes were closed. I didn't know where I was, what was happening. I just knew that my face hurt and my teeth were gone.
Yeah.
So I mentally prepared to wipe my tongue across missing teeth.
Yeah.
And the relief that I had when I could feel my teeth.
Yeah.
The best feeling ever.
Yeah.
Right. So I opened my eyes and I got blood everywhere. I'm covered in it. It's all over the turret, whatever. I don't think my tank commander saw any of it. I don't think he realized what was going on. Mm-hmm. He just looked down and he saw me bleeding and he's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. Like my first instinct was like thumbs up because I was alert.
Yeah.
That was a win.
Yeah.
And I had my teeth. I thought I was fine.
Yeah.
Right? Are you okay to keep fighting? Whatever. Like I didn't know where I was, but I didn't want to let the crew down.
Yeah.
We were on mission and we were engaging an enemy.
Yeah.
And it was the coolest tanking stuff that I had ever done.
Yeah.
Long story short, when they index it, which means stop, right? I mean, everything's done. Okay, the exercise is over. I remember him calling up, hey, real life casualty, no shit, real life casualty, get somebody here, whatever. And people came on top of the tank and literally like pulled me out because I wasn't right. Got me out of the tank, carried me over to some vehicle, got blood all over me. They put me in the AC. Long story short, they put me in a striker with some captain. And a striker this was their, I think they call it a Casevac vehicle, right?
Yeah, yep.
Is that what it is, or medevac?
Well,
Casevac's a civilian vehicle. Maybe medevac is a military vehicle.
Yeah, either way, though. I mean, like it's not.
They're kind of interchangeable.
Yeah. It's just that striker was a medevac.
Yeah, so they put me in a striker, and I remember this captain just cussing me out. I have blood all over my face. I'm tired. Just want to sleep. Like I was exhausted. Mm-hmm. He's cussing me out. Don't you dare fall asleep. I just remember him saying, and I didn't realize at the time, but they were worried that I was concussed and I was going to fall asleep.
Yep.
Which
you don't want to do.
Apparently isn't a good thing.
No, it's not. Yeah.
So he kept me awake, right? Because I'm an E4 and I've got a captain swearing at me. The only time I ever want to talk to a captain or see a captain is if I'm up there to get like promoted or an award or something, right? Like you don't want to talk to officers when you're an E4 particularly. Yep. So they bring me into a tent, and this is all active duty, right? Like they were prepared for real life casualties in the event just in case. I failed a concussion test, apparently miserably. To the point where they didn't trust the result. And so they sent me to another tent somewhere else where I failed again miserably.
Yeah.
And they made the determination to bring me to an actual ER facility. At the time, I don't think they treated TBIs or brain injuries as seriously as they do now.
Yeah,
Keep in mind, this is back in 2016, maybe whatever, 17. The Army medics insisted on being in the room with me when they met with the doctor who was taking care of the ER that day, and they're like, "Hey, this soldier failed 2 concussion tests." And for whatever reason, the doctor felt like I hadn't blacked out for long enough to put me through a protocol of TBI or concussion, and so they didn't. And I remember the Army medics, like, if their jaw could have been on the floor, it would have been. Like they were frustrated. They couldn't believe it. So they put me on light duty for 2 or 3 days. And I remember on day 2, I didn't realize at the time how like significant this event was. Put me on light duty for a couple days, which really sucked because I got to clean everybody's weapons.
Yeah, that's what they do. They make you do some stupid shit. Yeah.
But I remember, discovering that like my teeth were jagged. A couple of them were like really sharp. And when everybody came in for the day, I said, "Hey, Sergeant, just want to let you know, like, I think my teeth are chipped."
Yeah.
And I remember he was like, "Oh, are you kidding me?" Like they started just swearing because now they're like, "All right, now we have to really get this documented."
Yeah.
It has an impact, right? Like these training exercises, these training environments, right? So like the point of the story is like, 10% of tanking is just the best job in the world, but there's this extra 90%, which is maintenance, and then it's physical toll, right? And then it's, do you even notice what that toll looks like? Did you think you were fine and maybe you're not, right? I mean, I had one of my tank commanders lost part of his thumb because he got caught in the ammo door, and it's a hydraulic door, and it, there goes his thumb.
Yeah.
Right before his wedding, so he's in wedding photos with his thumb. And this is, like this isn't like National Guard stuff. This is like tanking stuff. They're unforgiving and they will hurt you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, I had decided at some point tanking was just kind of out of my system, right? And it wasn't in me anymore the way it was other people.
Yeah.
So, so I put my tanking days behind and found something else.
Yeah.
So,
not chaplain's assistant. What are you?
Oh, really? Yeah. So I decided to join the chaplain corps. After I got out of tanks, and actually, maybe this is good for anybody in the Guard to hear. In the National Guard, we get pretty familiar with this group called the ESGR. It stands for Employee Support for the Guard and Reserve. Okay. So these are the people that can advise you and your employer of your legal rights when you're employed. And really what that means is, hey, as an employer of someone who is in the Guard, they have these type of rights when they go to annual training, or if they get deployed, their job status is protected, or they can't not be considered for promotion because they're gone. Where was I going with that?
I don't know. Yes. Oh, chaplains. ESGR.
Yeah. See, my memory sometimes, like, I just lose where I'm going with things. Dude, I've legitimately forgot.
Well, you're switching over to go become a chaplain.
I was going into the chaplain corps, and then I went down a rabbit hole about the ESGR.
Yeah, ESGR with your
employees. Oh, okay. So there's the ESGR. They're there to protect soldiers. Okay, you can edit that out, right? I assume.
No, I won't.
Okay. They're there to, I was expecting you to say that. They're there to like protect soldiers of your rights or whatever. But every year you get a briefing about the ESGR. Hey, we're here for you if you have any questions. If you have uncomfortable conversations with your civilian employers, let us know. Pay attention to these things. So I'm working for an employer that I will leave unnamed. And I told my boss, I had just got back from NTC. I told my boss that I was going to BLC, Basic Leaders Course. And my boss made a comment. I won't forget it. He was like, well, what do you mean you're going to be gone for another month? You just came back. And I was like, well, look, like if I don't do this, I can't get promoted and I can't take on a leadership role and I can't progress my career. And his comment to me was, well, I guess I didn't know what it meant to hire someone in the National Guard. What he's telling me is the numbers that we're responsible for here at work are more important to me than what you're doing in the Army, despite the fact that I chose to hire you. So I left the office pretty ticked, right? I left his office and I went out and I called my unit and I said, hey, I just had that conversation that the ESGR warns us about. I don't know what to do. And they said, all right, if it happens again, give us a call. We've got the ESGR folks, like whatever, but like just see if this is a one-off thing, whatever. And like, I think they understand that employers don't always get it right. But I needed to protect what was at the time a 6-figure civilian job.
Yeah.
And so I walked into my tank unit, I think like the next drill, I walked into the leadership and I said, hey, I am concerned that I'm going to lose a very profitable civilian employer job, primarily based on the op tempo here in this unit. And an op tempo means operational tempo. And so at the time that I was in, I don't know if it's the case now, but at the time, they weren't just 2-day drills. Yeah. They were turning into like 4 or 5-day drills. Because we were doing more and more.
That's why I got out. Yeah.
It was too much, right?
Like the op tempo for work, and it was like, oh, now I got to do 4 or 5 days. It's like, Jesus.
Yeah. And I just said to him, I was like, my civilian career I can't afford to lose it right now. Right. And I was young, right? I was in my, late 20s at the time, right? I joined when I was 25, in my late 20s, making more money than I probably had any business making. I had to protect that. And so they said, hey, I tell you what, the op tempo here isn't going to get any better anytime soon. Why don't you go take a break and go drive around and get lost downrange for a while? What they meant was, we're going to assign you to the training sustainment unit. And that's just a different area in the National Guard where you report to drill, and I was range control. So I went from,
I remember that.
It was awesome. I loved it. I went from being in tanks and this crazy high op tempo to realizing that like, I got to protect my civilian career. This is what's going to get me into the house, the wife, the truck, the that whatever I wanted in life. And so I worked range control for 2 years, and I loved it because I got to see a different side of the Army, and I got to go out and safety check units as they were doing trainings. And then one day I got a call and they said, hey, somebody over in the automated target systems section is getting deployed and they need to pull somebody from range control, and they're going to pull you. You'll be back here. Don't worry about it. Well, I ended up liking it over at automated target systems, and they apparently liked me that I never went back to range control. Yeah. So, long story short, being knowledgeable and aware of the ESGR was beneficial because I kind of knew what the uncomfortable conversation with my civilian employer might sound like, and I was able to recognize it
right out the gate,
when it happened.
Yeah.
So I spent 4 years at TSU, and I was an E5 now. I'm a sergeant, right? Because I had gone to BLC, came back, right? It was a cool experience. I've got stories about that too, but I could go on forever. I remember, I think you and I were at your parents' pool, and it was Memorial Day, I believe.
Maybe, yeah.
I forget the exact, but something was happening in Minneapolis that we had no idea about, right? But we all came back and saw the news later that night and realized that like some events had taken place. Well, when I enlisted in 2012, I essentially lived like 5 houses away.
I lived with you.
You lived upstairs. I lived in the basement. So in 2012, we lived literally
a block away. Not even. It was
not
like
even a
the
block.
away,
It was half a block away
Yeah.
from where Floyd died.
Yeah.
Cup
Foods.
Yeah.
We walk by there. I walk
Cup
by there every
Foods,
day.
right?
Yeah,
George
yeah.
Floyd Square now.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
whole area is unrecognizable.
Yeah.
But so when I enlisted, one of the idealistic reasons why I enlisted was not just for, can I do something hard and hey, the health insurance will be really nice to have, but it was also like, I do truly want to serve my community. So I'm at TSU. I'm at the training sustainment unit. I'm working automated target systems, and I remember seeing the governor on TV and talking about a full-blown activation and all the things. And like, I legitimately thought, because I still live very close to North Minneapolis, that there was no way I wasn't going to get called to go report to an armory down the street. So I got my go bag and all my things ready, and I was just prepared to get a phone call. I'm an E5. I've got combat experience, and I don't mean like in combat, but like the training, right?
Yeah,
like I'm combat trained.
Yeah.
Hypothetically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I never got the call. So I called my unit at TSU and I was like, hey, I'm volunteering for this. Like, can you please attach me somewhere? And they said, well, Sergeant Skinner, you're assigned to TSU,
which is up in Ripley.
That's the training sustainment. You aren't assigned to the units that are going down there.
Yeah.
And I remember just feeling, it was the first time in my career that I had felt absolutely useless to the Army. And that my purpose was gone. Like, ultimately, I signed up because I wanted to serve. And the community that I grew up in South Minneapolis. I know the community. I know the streets. I know the areas. I wasn't able to go be of service when the city needed it the most. Instead, because everybody who was working up at the TSU got called down to the cities, guess who got called up to TSU? So I got to
2 hours away.
I got to go 2 hours to support
Yeah.
a unit that was deploying somewhere. It was an MP unit. And I had to go run the ranges so they could qualify to go overseas. So am I indirectly? Yeah, but no.
Yeah.
Like,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
and that was when I decided, like, okay, I could spend the rest of my career here as a E5, as a sergeant at TSU, and do nothing. I could literally ride this out. No one will notice. I could get through the next 10 years of my career, whatever it was at the time, and just be content. But that feeling of being useless and having more in the tank and wanting to be able to, like, develop never left. And so I had been looking at what we call the open vacancy report, and the state of Minnesota does a great job. The Minnesota Guard posts it online every month, and it shows the different jobs in the state that have vacancies that weren't pulled from people who are eligible that weren't filled by people that were eligible for promotion. So I saw religious affairs NCO on there.
Yeah.
And I just, maybe. I also saw mortuary affairs, and I had worked security for a minute, and I had done some morgue duty stuff. So I'd been around dead bodies. Like, I understood a little bit about, how to operate in that type of environment. So I made a phone call, talked to some person who was in mortuary affairs, and really kind of came to the determination that, like, it probably wasn't going to be a fit because it didn't feel like it was very structured.
Yeah.
It's kind of when I realized, like, I do need the structure of something, right? So fast forward a few more months, right? I'm still not content. I'm feeling useless in my career, and I'm really kind of just, like, at a crossroads. You had just decided to separate. So my buddy's gone. All I'm doing is running qualification ranges now and fixing ranges that are broken, which was fine. I liked it. But I didn't get to lead anybody. I didn't get to help anybody. I just wanted to be of service somewhere. So I went back to the open vacancy report, and sure enough, there it was, religious affairs NCO. And this time there was 2 slots open. One of them was in E6 and one of them was in E5. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put in for both. I'll put in for the E6 slot. And then I was advised to put in for the 5 slot, so I put in for both. And I got picked up in the 5 slot, and they said, yeah, come on over. We need religious affairs NCO. So imagine my surprise where I show up to my unit. Brand new religious affairs NCO. And I walk in the door and I say, hey, I'm Sergeant Skinner, whatever. And they're like, oh, you're the chaplain's assistant. Nice to meet you. And this guy was old school, so he sounded just like me.
Yeah.
And I was like, what did he just call me?
Yeah.
I'm not anybody's assistant.
Yeah.
I'm a religious affairs NCO. What does a chaplain's assistant mean?
Yeah.
Little did I know that they hadn't been updated on the regulations, because in 2015, the regulation changed from chaplain's assistant. The naming convention moved.
Yeah.
From chaplain's assistant to religious affairs specialist. If you were the rank of an NCO, you were referred to as a religious affairs NCO. Mm-hmm. And so to this day in the Army, I was on the phone 2 days ago talking to a unit, providing some advisement, and the person on the phone, right, who hasn't been in the Army nearly as long as I have, was talking about the chaplain's assistant. And I said, I will correct everybody vehemently, because it's been 10 years since the Army changed it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like an officer just letting something fly if 10 years ago I'm still using an old naming convention on a flight system or a vehicle system?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
So the naming convention changed, I believe, in part to put us more in line with like public affairs, mortuary affairs, more religious affairs. And in reality, we aren't assisting the chaplain as much as we are advising the chaplain. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the chaplain corps. I am not a chaplain. I have no desire to be a chaplain. Mm-hmm. But I support chaplains. I support command teams, and I support the soldiers who are our number one asset to be able to do the simple task, and I say that lightly, of fighting and winning America's wars. And if we don't have spiritually fit soldiers, we don't have lethal soldiers. And the Army believes that so much that it's a part of the H2F system, which is known as also their health and holistic fitness. It essentially says there's five realms of fitness that are absolutely necessary for soldiers to win and fight America's wars. So you need to be physically fit, you need to be spiritually fit, you need to be nutritionally fit, mentally fit, and I think sleep. Mm-hmm. You have to have sleep fitness to some extent. Yeah. And I'm hoping I'm not getting those wrong, because I'm supposed to be an expert in those. But H2F is kind of the area, and spiritual fitness is one of the realms. And so it's educating a lot of soldiers and command teams that spiritual fitness doesn't mean religion. You can have a religion or no religion at all, and the Army dictates. They essentially say, like, every soldier has to have some level of spiritual fitness to be successful in the battlefield. Mm-hmm. What is it that keeps Ethan able to continue to pull triggers when his battle buddies just went down? Mm-hmm. What is it that keeps that soldier grounded to the point where at the peak of stress, they can receive and internalize a command team directive or mission to be able to go back out and execute when things are harder than they ever have been before? For some soldiers, it is God or whatever they make of that, right? Mm-hmm. For some soldiers, it is their ability to practice something that keeps them centered or that brings them back to where they're good. Whether that's meditation. For some soldiers, it's physical fitness is a form of spiritual fitness, right? Mm-hmm. It gives them a release. It builds them back up. They feel stronger. They feel better. They feel energized. Spiritual fitness isn't one thing, but it's essential that you have identified what it is that makes you happy and keeps you fulfilled and keeps you grounded, so that when the nation needs you to, you can continue to execute. And I'll tell you, on my deployment from 23 to 24, I wasn't we were deployed stateside, but we were gone for 13 months. When we were in pre-mob, a chaplain was addressing the group of us that were about to go downrange, so to speak. And he said, a spiritually fit soldier is a lethal soldier. And I thought it was the cheesiest, most overblown, most ridiculous thing I ever heard. And I actually laughed at it. I'm the religious affairs NC. I'm like, okay, that's a little heavy-handed, chaplain. What are you talking about? A little did I know I was going to fully understand what he was talking about, because I got to meet soldiers who they were so just defeated by the monotony of the mission that we were doing. And by defeated, I mean they just didn't see a purpose. They didn't see the why. They couldn't keep the end state in perspective.
Yeah.
They were making decisions that were harmful not only to themselves, but maybe to their families, their command teams, their battle buddies, or their spheres of influence. And I had to have multiple conversations with soldiers. One of them, I was like, the soldier was talking about legitimately just abandoning post. I had multiple conversations about that.
Yeah. It's like, I'm leaving.
And trying to convince soldiers of all ranks, of all leadership levels, to just keep themselves grounded. Because there wasn't, for some of them, there wasn't a level of spiritual fitness that gave them that like total person fulfillment to be able to say, look, I realize things are bad, but I am going to continue to be good. Yeah. I'm going to continue to sustain. I'm going to continue to be able to hit reset because I use A, B, and C, and D to recenter, refocus, re-energize. A lot of these soldiers couldn't do that. They didn't have it. And so I thought back to that chaplain, a spiritually fit soldier is a lethal soldier. Fast forward to this last fall, I was sitting in jury duty. Ultimately wasn't selected, thank God. But I had nothing to do. So I pulled out on an iPad, I pulled out the Health and Holistic Fitness, the H2F regulation. And I was reading it all the way through the document. What else are you going to do in jury duty, right? Like just read an Army reg, right? Or doctrine, I guess. And I'm reading through it, and it just says, I keep finding a word in all of the sections. So whether it's about physical fitness or sleep or nutrition, the word lethality keeps running through the document. Lethality. And it dawned on me. Every one of these 5 elements, it's a pentagon, right? It's all about lethality. It's the only thing that matters. Can we sustain the warfighter to be lethal? And once I started talking to soldiers about lethality, the light would go off for some of them for why H2F was important. They would start to view spiritual fitness in a different way, right? Maybe it's a walk on the beach. Maybe it's a read of a book. Maybe it's a swing in a hammock, like something that centers you. Maybe it's praying, right? Talking to God, reading whatever text is sacred to you. That keeps you grounded. And so the Chaplain Corps has really allowed me to be able to, what we do there really is provide and advise. We provide for the warfighter. We advise for the command teams, right? And we give them, we give soldiers confidential space to be able to come to us with literally anything that they need to talk about. You have different staff sections, right? Like legal, JAG. You've got behavioral health. You've got medics. And then you typically have your unit ministry team or the UMT, your chaplain section, whatever, it's called all sorts of things. What the Chaplain Corps that separates us is clergy privilege. It's absolute ironclad, full-blown confidentiality. So you come to me and you say something in terms of, hey, such and such soldier maybe sexually assaulted me, or I've got some thoughts about hurting some people, right? I can't share that information with anyone no matter how badly I may want to scream it on a rooftop, because it's clergy privilege. It is protected communication.
Yeah.
It is absolute ironclad, unless you were to release your confidentiality in writing very specifically. And so the Army has said we have to have a place where soldiers can go and say anything and everything they need to, free of fear of reprisal.
Yeah.
And so the confidentiality piece is like this blessing, because I've had conversations with soldiers that are like really hard. And it's a curse, because sometimes you wish that you didn't hear what you just heard. And occasionally you end up then walking amongst people who now you have heard things about.
Yeah.
And they don't know that.
Yeah.
Nothing's different to them. And you can't treat them differently. You can't operate differently, because they could come to you to exercise confidentiality or for advice. So typically what we do is we advise on issues of morals, morale, ethics, and religion. We advise on it when it becomes relevant or to the surface. So if a soldier has a religious accommodation request, COVID-19 request, for example, they didn't want to get the vaccination, they could fill out a religious accommodation, a medical accommodation. Well, now we're advising on the sincerity of these requests.
Yeah.
Right? If it's Ramadan, for example, we're advising command teams on what they need to consider when it comes to like taking soldiers and maybe putting them on different shifts if they're in their annual training window. We might be advising them on major holidays that are coming up that could impact their formations, and make it so their command teams need to start to consider maybe like, hey, do these people need to go to synagogue, temple, church, whatever it happens to be, right? So in an operational environment, we may be meeting with a designated faith group leader of like a community, a village, and trying to build bridges and relationships so that we can continue the mission forward while having the trust and backing of a religious spokesperson in the community. Yeah. Right. And so we'll do, religious area assessments, right, for example. So it's a super, super, super dynamic position. And it's one in which the enlisted member of the unit ministry team works side by side with the chaplain. Yeah. Right. The chaplain, they can provide pastoral care and counseling. They can perform religious services. Yeah. Christian service, Muslim service, Jewish service, doesn't matter. They're effectively a staff officer as well, right? We are the voice of morals, morale, ethics, and religion when the chaplain is absent or not around. Sometimes a command team or certain people might ask us for our opinion in addition to or before or in lieu of the chaplain's opinion, because they understand that they need to ask the enlisted voice for the enlisted perspective. So it's a super dynamic position, because we get to advise command teams, we get to advise soldiers, we get to care for the soul of the Army, which is it's the best job I've ever had. Yeah. And I got to shoot tanks. You know what I mean? Yeah. But this is on such a so for me coming to the chaplain, and I had people, I swear like a sailor. Yeah. I could talk the tank talk with the best of them, right? This is definitely where I've wanted to be, and it's that fulfillment that I get in my career that I've been able to have that has allowed me to sustain some pretty tough times. Like, chaplains aren't perfect people, right? And I've had some bad experiences with some chaplains, and I've had some tremendously wonderful experiences. Just like any profession, there's good and bad on both ends, right? Yeah. But I continue to stay because there's command teams that need a place to speak themselves, and there's command teams that say, "Hey, we need to give our soldiers a place to be heard." And it's just such a privilege and an honor to be able to be in the chaplain corps. And we're a small corps. And so there's just a lot of people that don't know what we do or understand that, like, you know, I have the same confidentiality that a chaplain does. So if you don't want to meet with your chaplain, you can go to the religious affairs specialist or NCO assigned to that chaplain and exercise the exact same confidentiality. And it's different from what behavioral health or medical or legal have, because they will be mandatory reporters if certain things are said. For us, you must release the confidentiality.
Yeah.
So it's totally...
So you're going to ride that out then for the next remainder of your retirement, or like until you retire?
You know, for the foreseeable future, right? So I've got 13 years in now. Is my body going to hold up for another 7 years? Right? I'll be in my mid-40s.
Yeah.
By the time I get done, and that was my choice, right? Like I joined late, so to speak. 25 is kind of late. Look, the chaplain corps is not a perfect place, but I think that with enough time, I just hope that I leave it a better place than I found it.
Yeah.
And that my advisement is heard, received, and used to improve the operational picture for the soldiers that I'm now responsible for. So I'm at a brigade level. So I have battalion UMTs under the chaplain and I that I work with. And so my job is to train those 56 mics in the profession of being the best version of themselves as 56 mics, religious affairs specialists that they can be. And I love that because now I get to just share knowledge, teach, advise, redirect. Right?
Yeah.
All those things.
That's pretty sweet. So it's not even like you said, the religious aspect. That's more like on the chaplain per se, but you guys handle the spiritual aspect. So it's not like you need a degree in, or be a pastor or something like that. You know what I mean? Or like go through the whole, like get your master's or doctorate in religious affairs or something like that.
No, Ethan, you're 100% right. Like, so we don't go, okay.
Like you don't go down like the whole not rabbit hole, but you know what I mean? Like you didn't go to synagogue, or you didn't go to
seminary.
Seminary. Sorry, seminary.
So we don't have a master's in theology.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
We didn't go to seminary. And so for some chaplains, like they struggle with working with 56 mics with the religious affairs specialist.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that went to seminary and got the master's in theology. They're the ones that understand, like they truly are the subject matter expert when it comes to matters of religion. What makes the 56 mic, the religious affairs specialist, so unique is that we aren't constrained necessarily. So every chaplain has what's called an endorsing agency. I endorse this rabbi to be a chaplain. Okay. You're in the Catholic Church, so father, whatever, right? You have an endorsing agency, a body in the Catholic Church. The chaplain that I work with, his endorsing agency is the Methodist Church. Okay. If for whatever reason they lose their endorser, they're done. Like
Really?
The next day, being a chaplain.
How would you lose your endorser?
It happens.
It happens.
And I'm not laughing because like it's a good thing, but
it's like I know
it's almost like, what do you mean a chaplain can lose their endorser? Like it's so wild that it's like unbelievable. But the reality is they're human. And they make mistakes. Chaplains can lose their endorsers if you lose the command and trust of your command team, and there's enough violations where there's major ethical issues, if there's issues of morals, like it could happen. Right. The Army has a lot of processes, and they're in direct communication with these endorsing agencies because they rely on them to bring in other chaplains. So you could lose your endorsing agency. I don't have one of those. So
you're kind of on your own right now.
So if ex-chaplain is restricted by their specific faith group, and they can't perform a certain service for a soldier that is in a totally different faith group, they may not be able to provide a certain type of prayer or a certain type of last rite because their endorsing agency has hard left and right limits. as the religious affairs specialist, I don't have an endorsing agency. So could I pray a certain prayer for a Muslim soldier if it's not in my faith belief system? Sure. I don't have to worry about if this is okay for my endorsing agency.
I like you see it, try that.
Brush
up on your Arabic.
Yeah. What I will do is get them, a copy of the Quran, and I will make sure that I handle it appropriately. Like I've taken classes on how to handle the Quran, and I don't have an endorsing agency that says I can and can't for this soldier of this faith. It's one of the reasons why I want you to wear your dog tags is so that we can check your tag and see what your faith belief system is. If God forbid, you're in a casualty tent and we have to triage the spiritual need of the soldier due to unfortunate circumstances. Yeah. Right. But I don't have those restrictions because I don't have the agent. I don't have the endorser. Yeah. And so some chaplains will say, actually, no, I can't perform that
specific.
I can't teach that class to this person because of maybe their lifestyle, because my endorsing agency doesn't allow me to, whether it's a personal lifestyle choice or a religious lifestyle. Like, I can't do it, or I'm violating my endorser. In the Army, the interesting thing about an Army chaplain in the Guard is that on Sundays they have parishioners. Not all of them have a church or parishioners, but the Minnesota National Guard will allow their chaplains to go be at church on Sunday. And so it's almost like an agreement with the churches, right? I don't know if it's official agreement, but where like, hey, we're not going to take your chaplain out of church on Sunday other than like annual training, right? Yeah. Or a deployment. So a lot of our chaplains, we will make up that training on a Friday. So currently like once a quarter, we do a collective religious training where we bring in all the religious affairs specialists in the state and all the chaplains in the state and all the state leaders who are in the chaplain corps. And we conduct a joint training with all the other unit ministry teams, which is incredible, right? It's an opportunity to see the same struggles, the successes, the different operational environments that different chaplains are in, right? The last collective religious training we did, we kind of had a panel on postvention, which is short for how do we talk to soldiers in the wake of a suicide, right? And the chaplain's there to provide for the spiritual support of the soldiers. They're there to, again, open up the floor for them to be able to speak to them in full candor with confidentiality if they need to, right? But the chaplains are people too, and they've also lost a soldier in their formation, right? And so the Chaplain Corps of Minnesota takes a lot of care in making sure that we can take care of the soldiers. But they also make sure to take care of the parishioners in the state who the chaplains are responsible for on Sunday. So we'll do a training on a Friday and a Saturday to make up for that chaplain maybe being out of pocket on a Sunday. Yeah. Not there for their unit.
Makes sense.
But the religious affairs specialist, the NCO, is there on Sunday. Yeah. So there's still somebody from the unit who can provide that that confidential space if needed, or triage a situation. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why, I remember when we were in like big boot camp, Marine Corps boot camp's big on Sunday. Because the only way is like the only day you can escape drill instructors. Yeah. So everybody found their faith real fast at boot camp. And the Catholics, it was great. I loved it because I would go to the Lutheran ones, and then the Catholic mass fucking was like 3 hours. So we would all go to breakfast, I think it was. And then in like Sundays till like noon, because the Catholic mass went to like 11 or noon. I don't know if they had like multiple services or what. But then, so we'd get back, the Lutherans would all get back, or, whatever, Christians or Lutherans, we'd all get back and we'd be in the squad bay, like reading newspapers, because we're allowed to like buy one newspaper a week to, do whatever, write letters or whatever the fuck. And then, the Catholics they'd be taking forever. We'd be like, oh, this is awesome. And then they would come back and then we'd go to lunch. But that was the only time though. It was like everyone's just like, poof, like do not be in the squad bay, So you'd find like the Midwest guys or like Lutheran, like, let's go to Lutheran service, So
I remember that in basic training.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very key for us.
I remember hearing some soldiers come back. I'm not Buddhist, right? So I didn't go to the Buddhist service or anything, but I would go to the traditional like Lutheran service. Yeah. I kind of found myself gravitating back to the Catholic service.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in the Catholic church.
Did you really?
I did.
I didn't know that.
My grandparents brought me to Catholic mass every Sunday.
No shit.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So I was raised Catholic. I was educated, middle school, Lutheran.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, because we were in
And then I was
Lutheran
confirmed
school.
Methodist.
Yeah.
And then I went to a free church after that, right? So
Yeah.
like I'm kind of a religious mutt, I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
right? For lack of a better term. But so I never went to the Buddhist service, but I always thought about it because people kept telling me that they had donuts.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember being like, oh, they don't even let us have sweets and
boot camp, yeah.
in the early phases
yeah,
of boot camp, basic training, like we couldn't have desserts, we couldn't touch the sweets.
Yeah.
So I could go there and get donuts.
Become a Buddhist for that.
Yeah, I mean, you
Basic
you
training,
think about the things that give you
yeah.
reprieve from a drill sergeant,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, we're just happy to like get away. It was great. Yeah.
yeah, that was the win. So
That's awesome though. So I mean that it's funny. I never would have thought I'd seen you like said in the religious affairs MOS.
it's really interesting. I said earlier a couple times that I believe everything happens for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. When we were in school together, it was a Christian Lutheran grade school.
Yeah.
Right. And I was there from 6th to 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which is crazy because over 3 years, I've maintained some of the longest friendships in my life. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't do that in high school or grade school. I always wondered why I didn't feel the same connection with God that some of my classmates did. And I specifically remember being at this event, and I think it was in St. Paul, somewhere called Acquire the Fire. Do you remember hearing about this? Were you there?
I was there.
See, I don't remember you being there.
That's the thing is, I don't remember me and you. I went to one of those, but
Okay.
I don't think with you though.
I was there.
I went to one of those. Yeah.
I was there with some girls who I was in with in grade school.
Yeah.
I'll leave them unnamed, but I remember, seeing them put their hands up and
Yeah.
feeling the Spirit, feeling
Yeah.
God, feeling Christ, whatever they were feeling, they were fully in it.
Yeah.
And I remember how shitty I felt because like I just felt like an outsider, like looking at that and saying like, what's wrong with me? Mm-hmm. Why can't I feel that through my fingertips the way they are?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why am I not gyrating around?
Yeah.
Right. Like,
you're not alone in that because there's a lot of, because we went as a group and I was like, our group was kind of like, what's going on? Because I don't even think the people we were with, and like I said, we didn't go with you, but I remember we went, man, I was pretty young. I would have been, actually might have been before 6th grade. It might have been before I met you. I think we went in like 4th or 5th grade maybe or something like that.
Remember.
And I just remember we went and I was like, okay, we're doing this Acquire I thought it was cool because we were spending the night in the school and we were like watching movies like on the TVs, like I thought that was the cool part. But we did do the Acquire the Fire thing, and I just remember being like at the convention center, I was like, this ain't for me, man. Like it's the whole, they were like shouting and everyone's doing the same thing. I mean, and you kind of look around and you see the people that are like, I don't know about, I'm not really about this, I like my traditional, everyone's quiet, listen to the sermon, but
and everybody has their own flavor or version of religion that they're comfortable with or that they're, but for me, it was like, man, there's something wrong with me. Mm-hmm. I don't feel that.
Yeah.
But there's been a few instances in my life, and I think that tank incident was one of them. There's been a few other instances in my life where that wasn't God trying to say something, that I don't know what it was. Mm-hmm. Right? So, I believe that to whatever your belief system is, God or a divine being or a greater power, right? However you want to put that in for yourself.
Yeah.
I believe that it's working through me. Like something brought me to the chaplain corps that like to your point.
Yeah.
You of all people in the chaplain corps, right? Like I've heard that from a lot of people because I'm not, there's some religious affairs specialists that are there and they love talking about religions and they love talking about God and they love having those conversations. And I never felt for me, it's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about service to others and caring for people in their worst moments. Right. But I've always tried to pay attention or recognize when God's trying to say something or if there's something bigger happening around me or if I'm alive. Like I had a really bad accident at work, right? Mm-hmm. I was a millimeter away from cutting my main artery, and I cut 2.5 tendons in my left hand.
Yeah.
Working in a restaurant.
Yeah.
I easily could have died that day.
Yeah.
And I had a piece of glass sitting on top of my main artery, and I remember the surgeon was power washing my wrist out, and he goes, my father figure at the time was in the room, and the surgeon was like, "Mr. Skinner, take a look at this piece of glass. Do you see this?" And I'm over here doing this because I can't.
Yeah.
Can't look.
Yeah.
And I remember him being like, "Oh yeah, whatever," and the surgeon's like, "Well, that piece of glass is sitting a millimeter on top of your son's main artery, and he's very lucky to be here."
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Red Lobster.
I was working at I was working at Red Lobster of all places.
Red Lobster almost took your life.
I almost died in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? I fell on top of a bunch of drinking glasses and cut my wrist open.
Yeah, jeez. I remember when that happened. Or you telling me, I was like, God damn.
It's wild, man.
Yeah,
it was wild. And then, I had this tank accident where it's like, if I wasn't wearing those goggles, would I be here? Would I be functional?
Yeah.
Would I be deformed? Like, would I, and we can all think about near misses or whatever, but something has me here operating for the Army in this capacity because it's where I am supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest moment for me when I was able to realize that, we were with a unit that had just lost a soldier, and so we were doing a memorial ceremony, and those are required. Yeah, the command team can require you to go to those. A memorial service is optional because they're religious in nature. Mm-hmm. Okay. The chaplain and I had gone to be with the unit that day just to be available after the ceremony. Mm-hmm. And the whole day went by and not one soldier came into our office. And we went and we saw soldiers and rotated around, let them know we were there. But he said, "Hey, our office is over here." But we kept the door shut because we didn't want people to... Sometimes when people want to go see the chaplain, they don't want other people to know that they're going to see the chaplain.
Yeah.
And when they walk out of there, they don't want people to see them walking out of there either. Mm-hmm. And we were wrapping up for the day. I remember getting my bag packed. And a soldier walked in, and 2 hours later, after some tears and some hugs, the soldier said, "Hey, I didn't know what I needed when I walked into this room, but I know I got it." And I just got goosebumps because for me, that was the moment where I knew that what I was doing was for a purpose, for a greater calling. And so for all the times where I didn't feel connected to religion or spirituality or God, I'm here doing some stuff that maybe some of the most religious people that I spent time around wouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
They couldn't do.
Yeah.
But something brought me here and has kept me serving people, serving God, serving a greater purpose. And I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah.
You know,
That's awesome, bro.
I don't know what it's like in the Marine Corps, but I imagine that you guys had your own version of a unit ministry team or chaplains. Did you have any experiences with?
Not really. I mean, we were just go. We didn't have anything on the FOB in the first deployment. Second deployment, we were at Camp Fallujah, and then third, we didn't. No. So I was like, we did have chaplains that rolled around. I mean, but my first interaction was mostly in the Guard, though, that were very active chaplains. I do remember some of the chaplains in the Marine Corps, but again, though, it was like only when they spoke to his battalion. It was like, oh, everybody get together. Here's the chaplain. That was it. And we avoided them like the plague because you didn't want to go to the chaplain because the chaplain's gonna. We were under the assumption that chaplain's gonna talk to people after, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Like knowing what you're saying, maybe the chaplains never did, but we didn't go. It's like going to medical. You don't go to the chaplain. You deal with all your stuff on your own. You bury that and you bury it and you move forward. So that was our mentality. We never went to chaplains, or we never, unless it was really, really bad. But most guys never did. It's like going to medical. You just never went.
It's interesting, I wonder what the culture shift may look like, from that time to now, and if there is a culture shift at all.
I think there probably is. I mean, even in general, people talk about all the time. We're sitting on a podcast talking about it, so I'm sure there's maybe information's I think a little more plentiful now. Back in our day, or back in my day, way back in 2005, you just can't Google that. I wouldn't know that I can go to the religious affairs and be like, no, he can't talk to anybody. Like, I wouldn't have known that. You can't find that. I would assume that you would tell everything to the psych, over to psychology or whatever, and to the shrink, and then I can't deploy. And like, that's why guys never went and talked to a therapist, because you didn't want to not deploy, have them
interesting to hear you
make
say
a
that.
call. Now I'm sure now it's just different. Now there's just more information out there. Or you can just text, you know what I mean? Like, we weren't texting chat, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, call us, whatever, and again, I think active duty is a little bit different mentality. Like, you're there to get after it. That's your job, so that's my culture. I'm sure maybe if it was like a different unit, you know what I mean? Like, that's not what I did, might have a different view on it than like infantry Marines,
No, to your point, when we deployed in 23 to 24, when we were doing our left seat, right seat, and for those that don't know what that is, that's it's essentially when you're saying, hey, like, you've been driving in the car, you've been in the left seat, we're now in the passenger seat, and you're going to teach us everything as the driver, so that we can eventually
It's a
sit in the
handover.
left seat, right?
Yeah.
It's a pass off of information, operational standards, all those things. We were interviewing soldiers who were still on duty from the soon to be outgoing unit. And the chaplain and I were just asking them what some of the struggles were and what some of their hardest things they dealt with were. And exactly what you're saying, it was, but for them, it was with behavioral health. It was, hey, we just stopped talking to behavioral health because we all understood that the soldiers that were talking to behavioral health would get refrad, which stands for release from active duty.
Yeah.
They would get removed from the deployment. And so then you had soldiers that didn't trust their behavioral health, and they didn't have buy-in. They didn't think they could get care. They thought it was less than stellar or subpar. And so they just stopped talking. That was my biggest fear on my deployment, was that if that feeling, if that idea slipped into the subconscious of the soldiers, that if they talked to us, something would get out. Our brigade chaplain was very clear with us. He said the number one thing that you will need to do on this deployment is protect confidentiality. And dude, I've got stories about soldiers saying stuff to me and asking me for advisements about situations they shouldn't be in, and I'm advising or I'm providing to them whatever I can, and then I'm getting phone calls at 1 or 2 in the morning from soldiers in different parts of the area of operation who are directly impacted by that soldier's situation that I heard earlier that day.
Yeah.
And now I've got to advise them on the moral thing to do. And I have to, you find yourself like not playing both sides, but trying to equally advise and provide to them. And now you have the knowledge of the things, and you're advising and providing without letting the knowledge of the things get to either side. And for me, it was like, if I lose this trust, this sacred trust, we're done.
Yeah.
We're not mission capable anymore. We're not mission effective. Our command team won't trust us. We lose everything. And so I'm really happy that, I felt like I did everything I could to protect it, and we got through the mission. And I think I did the best job I could, but to my knowledge, right, I protected confidentiality all the way through, and I intend to for the rest of my career. But these soldiers who were like, we don't go talk to behavioral health, we won't do that. It was good for us to see that, because what we ended up doing on our deployment was we partnered with our behavioral health folks. And there were times where our soldiers started to get the creep of that type of verbiage or that type of mindset. And so as the UMT, the unit ministry team, we were able to come in and say, hey, look, like we know the behavioral health team, and I don't know what you heard about the last one, but our behavioral health team, they're here to make sure that you stay on mission. And they were very clear about that. Like, we're not trying to refrat anyone.
Yeah.
And so we were able to come in and provide, I think, a level of stability for the BH team. And as a result, the BH team was able to say, hey, look, like, fine, you don't want to talk to us right now. You're not there yet. Talk to these guys over here.
Yeah.
Because guess what they have? It's absolute clergy privilege.
Yeah.
And so we were able to help each other without sharing the confidentiality, without getting into the details, unless it was obviously released by the soldier.
Yeah.
But it's wild, man.
Yeah.
Like the perceptions are real, the preconceived notions of like not talking to the chaplain or the behavioral health.
Yeah.
It's still there. But to your point now, like there's way more ability to be educated.
Yeah.
Much faster.
Much faster. Yeah, I think so too. And there's people's mental health stuff is all in the ether too now. You know, everyone. It's like it's a joke now. It's like we don't need to hear all about your feelings. You know, like but it's out there. Like you go to Instagram, you're gonna find some information or some guru or whoever to be like, guess what the chaplains of assistance or not chaplains, but religious affairs does. You know, so it's like you're gonna find that information or you just contact people that have already been in and be like, hey, man, like just the sheer networking on.
Who do you talk to,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Like you could hit up a social media account and be like, hey, man. And they'll be like, yeah, absolutely. Go check out, religious affairs. They're not actually going to do this,
right.
Or whatever. So, yeah, man. I think it's a bit different now. I think, and also too, especially after the GWAT in the last 20 years.
Global war on terrorism.
Yeah, global war on terrorism. TBI is a big one that now everybody talks about, the concussions, and then it's also mental health and all that other stuff. And that stuff's very, very much into the, I don't want to say mainstream, but on a lot of people's minds.
It's interesting because like now that we have veterans, right? You're a veteran. I technically...
You're a veteran.
I'm a veteran, yeah.
You serve the military, you're a veteran.
Well, by the definition term, and then you have like a federal standard which says like if you've been, like for example, my wife who did 6 years in the Guard, I don't know if she's federally recognized as a veteran. I'd have to look it up.
Oh, okay.
Now in the dictionary, yes, she served her country. She's a veteran.
Yeah.
But I don't know that she would be federally, like at the VA, for example, if they recognize veteran status.
Really?
Due to lack of deployment time, right? So there's I think parameters around that. There's little thresholds that you have to pass.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In the last 10 years, the conversations around suicidal ideation and what it means to be thinking about suicide or what it means for people to have those thoughts that maybe weren't invasive before but are now, right? Like where did that come from and how does it start, right?
Yeah.
And I was talking to a provider once and they were like, suicidal ideation is normal in the brain. It means that your brain is trying to find a way out of a stressful situation. It's a normal thing to try to get out of a stressful situation. It's how we handle it that matters, and I was like, that's totally reasonable, right?
Yeah.
So like these conversations are now more out there. They're more public.
Yeah.
It's more accepting, right? Where when I first got into the Guard in 2012, like nobody wanted to be in like a suicidal, the suicide briefings. Cause yearly we still get the briefings on that type of stuff. And like everybody was just uncomfortable to be there and we didn't want to talk about it. Right?
Yeah.
And look, like we can look across the military and we can see areas in which service members are feeling more empowered to speak up. Look at the Navy pilots and Army pilots, and they're talking about like the weird stuff they're seeing when they're on training flights.
Yeah.
UAPs, UFOs, like they're now more open and more apt to talk about the things that they're seeing because I think there's a culture change in the military that like if you share something, it doesn't mean you're going to get released from your service.
Yeah.
It's a positive step in the right direction.
I agree. Well, man, rock and roll, 2 hours, 15 minutes.
Hopefully I gave you what you wanted.
Absolutely you did. Hi, bro. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.